again. It's me, Jack Wallen, and I am here, as usual, to give advice to artists of all kinds. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your busy, busy life to listen to me. And here we go with what I have to say today. So, as you may or may not know, I am both an actor and a writer. I have been so for most of my adult life. And a lot of times, I try very hard to bridge those two things, to use the tools from one in the other, to elevate the craft. And so a lot of days I spend thinking about those ways in which I can take something from my acting career and help it make it to improve my writing career. And a lot of times when people ask me, especially new writers ask me, what should I do? What advice can you give me to make me a better writer? And one of the first things I usually say is take an improv class, because improv is a great way to help you to learn how to write dialogue. Because when you get forced into a situation where you're having to improv, you really have to think on your toes and think very quickly. But that's not what I want to talk about this time. One of the most important piece of advice that I give to young actors also, believe it or not, applies to writing. And that advice is very simple. Be present. I know it sounds very simple, but in application, it's not quite as simple as you think. Now, I've been on stage a lot when I've been working with other actors, and you can look in their eyes and you can tell they're not there. They're somewhere else. They're thinking about a shopping list or what they're going to do after rehearsal or the performance or you name it. They're just not there. You could be doing the scene and you could throw something completely different at them. Don't do that, but you could, and they'd totally miss it. When you're not present, you miss all the subtext and all the really good, juicy stuff in a scene. Now, how do we apply that as a writer? It's actually easier than you think. So, I have seen on social media various and sundry memes that apply to writers and effectively say this: I would get a lot more writing done if it weren't for all the distractions in the world. You know where I'm going with this. Imagine you're a writer. Why would you imagine that? Imagine you're a writer and you're writing along, you're like, oh, I wonder what's happening on social media. So you stop writing and you go over to Facebook or X, Twitter, whatever the heck it's called right now, and you start doom scrolling through those social media sites. You scroll, and you spend 5 or 10 minutes doing that. Okay. The first thing that happens is that your creative brain kind of shuts off, and it's taken over by banality, plain and simple. Because really, when you're doom scrolling, you're even barely paying attention to what you're scrolling through. Mostly you're just scrolling through and seeing images and stopping on an image that entices you or whatever. So you do that for 5 or 10 minutes, and you're like, okay, enough of that. Let's go back to writing. So you switch apps back to your word processor, whichever one you use, and you look at the words you've just written. You're like, where was I? What was I thinking? So you spend about 5 or 10 minutes or so getting back into the groove. So you've officially wasted about 20 minutes. Now imagine if you do that 3 times while you're writing. You've effectively wasted about an hour, which you could have spent writing. See where I'm going with that? But it's not just the time involved. Think about this. You could be writing along, and somehow your brain goes, oh, let's go over here. And you follow that advice from your brain. And you go over to Facebook, or you go over to the news, or you check your email, or whatever. What if, just humor me with this, what if the next sentence that you would have written would have been so absolutely profoundly brilliant It would have taken your book, the story, into a completely different direction and would have been, oh, the absolute most amazing thing you've ever created. But unfortunately, because you weren't present, you missed out on that. And instead, what you got was social media or the news or your email or whatever. Now, I'm not saying that you should never do that. But here's what I do. Do as I say. Do as I do, not as I say. No, do as I say and do. Regardless. When I sit down for a session of writing fiction, the first thing I do is I check my email. Once that's done, I'll go to Facebook for a couple minutes. Scroll, whatever. Then I'll go over to Twitter, scroll, whatever. I might check a news site, maybe not. And then I go back to the writing, or I go to the writing. I've already satiated that need for banality or information, and now I can sit down and write uninterrupted. I can be present because I have scratched that itch. I don't need to do it anymore. I can just be there and focus on the words. And by doing that, and I'm not kidding you, by doing that, in about an hour, I can bang out 1,000 words. No distractions. Now, there are sometimes, of course, when I'm writing along and I have to research something. I have to check a fact. But I tell myself, all I'm going to do is I'm going to check this fact, look this thing up, and then I'm going to go right back to the writing. And by doing that, I am not interrupting the flow of creativity because the distraction is purposeful. And the purpose is to continue with the writing, because without that research or whatever, I couldn't continue on anyway. So my brain is still engaged creatively. And as soon as I get back to the page that I'm writing, I'm there. I'm engaged. I'm present. If, however, I take that break and do social media or whatever, I'm no longer present. And I have to work to be present again. So it may sound easy. It really does sound easy. But in practice, it's not quite so easy because we have been trained over the years to follow distraction. We are like a bunch of squirrels. You know what I mean by that. So what you need to do as a writer, as an actor, as an artist, period, is learn how to be present, to shrug off the distractions, whatever they may be, and just focus on your craft. Now, as an actor, that really just essentially means paying attention to your scene partner and what's going on around you on the stage. As a writer, it means you've got to train your brain to set aside all those distractions and just focus on the words and the characters and the story. Let that be the center of your attention. Let that be the only thing that draws your attention while you're writing. So set aside an hour or hour and a half or 2 hours every day and say, this time is just for writing, no distractions. And that doesn't mean, I don't advocate those applications that force your social media to be shut off or whatever. I don't advocate those things. I want you to be able to do this without third-party assistance. You need to be able to learn how to be present on your own so that you can, when it is necessary, go away from that word processor and look something up and then come right back to it. It will take you some time to get to that point where you can just focus on the writing and not give in to that temptation, because the temptation will always be there. Just like when you're acting, when you're in the middle of a performance. I have been in so many performances where there are so many distractions. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the middle of a performance and somebody decides they need to break out a piece of hard candy and or a cough drop and unravel it with that loud plastic in the middle of an auditorium, and they think they can't be heard, but boy, can they. I remember one time I was in a production of Dracula. I was playing Renfield. And in the middle of the show, somebody's hearing aid went off. They didn't know that it was happening. But it was this high-pitched screech. And everyone could hear it. But nobody bothered to tell that person that it was their hearing aid was going off. So we on stage had to tune it out. We had to be present. Because if we weren't present, we may as well not have been there. And if you can't be present as a writer, you may as well not even write. Because what you do what you write when you're not present will be a half effort at best. So shrug off the distractions, focus on the words, and be present. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you again for giving me the time to hear me blab for a bit. I very much appreciate it, and I hope that my words help you in some way, inspire you or whatever, just get you over a hump if you're in front of a hump. And if you like what I say, subscribe or spread it around, share this video with another artist that you know. Maybe it'll help them. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.